I'm a good friend of Code for All. I am hosting today the fourth Civic Technology and SDGs webinar and final session of 2022. So today we're going to be talking about how civic tech can help with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, um, and how we can, as a community of civic tech practitioners and organizations, how can we address and help come closer to the goals. Um, so in today, we're really going to focus on SDG 11, which is on sustainable, inclusive, and safe and resilient cities. One of my personal favorite goals, if we have to choose between them. So the background for this goal is that in 2007, the UN realized that the world was becoming increasingly urbanized. Um, and as such, we know that by 2030, 60% of the world, everywhere, is going to be living in a urban area. Um, in some places, this has already happened, or more places are urbanized beyond the 60% benchmark. So the United Nations, as part of their thinking, moving beyond the Millennium Development Goals towards the SDGs, um, figured that it would be important, and it is a very lofty goal, to make sure that human settlements are safe, inclusive, and sustainable and resilient for all. On a personal note, I live in Bogota, Colombia, and I find this uh, very interesting and very pervasive in my everyday life. If you've ever been to Bogota, you see how informal settlements surround different parts of the cities. And this is not just the case for me, but in many other cities that are facing rapid urbanization due to better economic opportunities, or people fleeing internal conflict, or conflict abroad. Um, so that is a very brief and personal, I guess, introduction on what the SDGs are. Today we have a expert and quite started group of panelists that will be joining us to talk about the goals, and how we can contribute to that. Um, Before introducing our group of panelists, if you are, and if you want to read more about the SDGs, Mariana, who's in the background, will be sharing some links specific to SDG 11 and some of the work that Code for All is doing for that, as well as um, more ways that you can keep getting involved in the series that Code for All is putting uh, regarding the SDGs and civic tech. Um, we have a few housekeeping items as well. So during the session today, we'll hear from our panelists and from our speakers, and then we'll have a period for questions. You can share these questions to, if you have any, in the chat, or if you're watching on YouTube there as well, and we'll do our best to collect them and then address them during the question and answer period. And finally, this session is being recorded. So, if if you're working from home and somebody knocks at your door, or, your child needs attention, or your dog starts barking, then, you can feel free to watch the session, whatever you missed, at a time of your convenience. So that's housekeeping. Those are the SDGs. Now we'll really get into it, and I'll start by introducing our panelists. So first up to speak will be Sean Russell. He's project manager at Open Up. He's in Cape Town right now, and he'll have to leave the session a little earlier. So if there's any pressing questions for Sean, make sure you record them. Next, we'll have Alma Rangel. She's in Mexico, and she's the executive director for Codeando Mexico, depending if your first language is Spanish, we pronounce it Mexico. Then we have Gurden Batra. He's a design technologist at Dark Matter Labs, usually in Helsinki, but today in California. Then we have Sinia Del Villar, who's a data science research director from the Data Pop Alliance. Sinia, you'll have to tell us which city you're located and which country you're joining us from. And then finally, we have Martin Bagratz. I'm pronouncing that with a Spanish accent. He's a research associate at RWTH Aachen University, which is close to Cologne. Cologne has a great Gothic cathedral. If everybody's in town, highly recommend you guys go see it. And that's our illustrious panel. We'll start with Sean. So please take it away and feel free to share your screen. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Christian, and hi to everybody. Can you see my presentation screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah. So the SDG 11, making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. I think it's an amazing goal. If for one reason, the kind of the city that I live in, I ask myself these questions: is it inclusive? Is it safe? Is it resilient? And is it sustainable? And I think we score very low for almost all of those four kind of questions. Resilience, I'm not so sure about. I might need to brush up on what exactly the latest definition of a resilient city is. I mean, it's still here, it's still going. So maybe there is quite a bit of resilience from the people who live here to make sure that it's not completely brought down by not being inclusive, not being safe, and not being built in a very sustainable way. For those who don't know, Cape Town, there's a lot of gentrification and a lack of security of tenure. In terms of safety, it's one of the most dangerous places when it comes to kind of violent crime in South Africa and even in the world. And in terms of safety and resilience, inclusivity and sustainability, we do also have a long history of forced removals. What were kind of legalized forced removals under apartheid are now kind of done in a way that's still kind of backed by the law, but just in the form of gentrification and rising house prices, and then a lack of places for people to live. So if you see a map of Cape Town, the kind of red and orange areas there in the middle, if you can see my mouse, are the poorer areas, and then to the kind of left on the west side and on the north side where it's purple and blue, those are the more affluent areas. And if we look at this map of kind of income, household income, and then we look at a map of race by area, we'll see that those same areas are mostly white, the west and northern sides, and then the middle parts are mostly Black, African, and colored areas. So if you look at Cape Town and you're looking at inclusivity, we probably score very, very low. So yes, amazing goals that need to be achieved. Cape Town is falling behind. So what is Civic Tech? What is Open Up? And what is the project that I'm working on, the eviction project? How are we trying to change that? What is our theory of change? And it kind of can be distilled down to two very important objectives of a organization that we partner with called Ndefuna Kwazi. And as a civic tech organization, we find it really important to partner with context experts in whatever area, usually NGOs or organizations working on the ground level. But so Ndefuna Kwazi are a land and housing organization. So that allows us as a civic tech organization to work in many different contexts without needing to be experts. So what NU tried to do is they've got two kind of objectives. The one is expansion of affordable housing, and this is in order to achieve most of those SDG 11 goals. And then at the same time, there's no point in trying to expand access to affordable housing in good areas without protecting the little affordable housing that exists at the moment. So it's really about expansion and protection. And the eviction project is all about protection. So protection of affordable housing by producing a tool. So it's an online guide with a number of tools, but it's mostly just actionable information. If we distill it down to its most important kind of thing, is that someone, and we found this doesn't exist in many places. It definitely doesn't exist in South Africa, but all it really was someone taking the time to make the law easier to understand. Evictions, there's very little financial incentive in helping people who are being evicted and who can't afford their own help, because obviously they don't have the means to pay for lawyers. So the legal industry kind of turns a blind eye, and there's no one really looking out for people who are the most marginalized people who are being evicted. So what we did was we took the law and we packaged it in an easily actionable step-by-step way. It goes into a lot of depth, but it's also in a language that people can understand. And I think there's also a bunch of tools kind of related to it, but it's mostly really about actionable information at its core. And so then, so just looking at our indirect targets, just to answer the questions that were asked of us. So our two main overall objectives are to reduce unlawful evictions and to reduce evictions into homelessness. And these are very difficult to track. What civic technology allows us to do is to track these kinds of things, but it is still very difficult to do those. So what are our direct targets? We make this assumption, and we do a lot of research on how we can get from our users if we are reducing unlawful evictions and reducing eviction into homelessness. But we can increase users to our site, to access to the information. If we know that the information is helpful to people, we know that increasing users means we can increase impact. And then the second is to increase use metrics. So more people are coming to the site, using the tool, but are they getting value out of it? Are they spending more time on it? Are they spending time using the tools? And I think that kind of rolls really nicely into that third question about scale. A lot of civic tech organizations spend most of their time and their energy experimenting and creating cool things, but there isn't this incentive necessarily always to scale it. In a commercial project, without scaling it, you're gonna die. You're not gonna make any money. But if you're being paid by funders for a grant, often you can create something, and you can say, everyone can pat themselves on the back and say, well done. Well, we've created this thing, and some people enjoy it, but there isn't this massive need to scale. And I think that's kind of a massive lost opportunity. And I think really to make the most impact, tools like the eviction project and other tools that we can see get good traction, it's almost imperative that we scale, because we need to help as many people as possible. And I think, again, not to take too much from the commercial sector, but looking at practices that kind of commercial tech firms do, that a lot of NGOs and a lot of civic tech organizations probably don't spend enough time and effort on, and that's marketing, whether it's paid and unpaid. That's probably the main one. And then also meeting people where they are. I think we do. Using stakeholder networks is really important. That's something we do. And then getting back to something that kind of the commercial sector does well is content and SEO. I mean, we spent a little bit of time and money on an SEO professional. We've got them in-house, and we tried to do two things. We were getting far too many non-South African users using the tool, which made no sense because the law only applies to South Africans. And through a little bit of SEO work over 2 months, we reduced our target audience that we weren't trying to target by 84%. And we increased the audience that we were trying to target by 17%. So things like SEO and having good content in a civic tech space is something that we really need to scale our information products. Understanding the UX of shareability and having calls to action is something that can also sometimes go by the wayside. And then, as I said in the beginning, like experimentation and analytics is really important. So, I mean, civic tech, there's a lot of smart people in it, and it's an amazing industry to be in. But I found we do sometimes lack some of the pushing on to the next level that commercial firms do in terms of their marketing and their content and their SEO. And I think the last little bit of it, and sorry that it's such a short talk, I could probably talk for kind of hours and unpack a lot of these things, is on collaboration. And I think organizations and civic tech organizations that market well and are good at getting good tools and good information products out there should help each other so that everybody has better marketing, that people meet people where they are, and that we can spread this kind of information around more. Content partnerships are very important for us. We work in tech. We are not housing and eviction specialists. So partnering with other organizations where there are civic tech or just other kinds of NGOs, context experts, is really important. We need to collaborate around tool development with people who are users and not kind of producers of tools. And then just general user feedback, I think, is really, really important for us in our collaborations. Tapping into networks of people, in our case, tenants, poor and vulnerable tenants who need help in their evictions. Tapping into that through these collaborations with other organizations is really, really important to what we're trying to achieve. I hope I haven't taken more than 5 minutes, and I hope everybody have I got more time to speak, or have I kind of hit my limit there?
No, Sean, you're good. I think you're within the 5 minutes. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, great. Definitely the collaboration aspect resonates with me. Like, I see a lot of access to justice work and working really closely with kind of grassroots lawyers and activists in informal settlements. So yeah, very interesting. Same. I wish we had hours and hours to talk. But
if I could just talk about two of our collaborations. So one is with that organization, Ndufuno Kwazi, who are land and housing activists. So they provide a lot of support in terms of petitioning government and making those big kind of political pushes. And we've actually partnered with them for them to get better at using data. So we're not only about like tools and apps and stuff, we're also big into open data and using data to make social change. So that's an important collaboration we've made with them. And then there's another organization that's kind of a satellite group with them, which is more of a kind of grassroots movement called Reclaim the City. And that's really pushed forward by poor and working class people who are currently occupying land, occupying buildings in Cape Town. So seriously at the forefront of trying to disrupt the inequality and the lack of inclusivity in Cape Town. And we get so much value out of them that it's I mean, we wouldn't be able to do this kind of work without them. So yeah, collaboration is vital. I think that's me. Thanks so much.
no, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And yeah, I think somebody asked if you could share some of the links.
Yes, I can do. I'll share them in the chat now.
And I invite everyone to have a look and learn more about the great work being done in Cape Town. Up next, we have Alma Rangel joining us from Mexico. Alma, if you're able to share your screen, please go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So, hi, I come from a civil society organization in Mexico that's called Codeando Mexico. And one of the main things I want to start talking about within the organization is how we work, because that's very important for this project. So we're a community-based organization. What that means is that we have a core team that basically takes on the day-to-day, the strategy, the project management, and whatever the organization needs to work every day. But we also have a very big community around the organization with people who are volunteers, who have skills on development, data science, design, that want to bring those technical skills to the public space and help solve public problems. So why am I talking about this? Because a couple of years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, we had a community model that was focused on brigades. So we had local groups working and thinking about local problems within their cities and trying to figure out solutions with guidance and support from the court. This is a project that was originally built by one of those brigades in a very small city in Mexico that's called Jalapa in Veracruz, which is near the coast of the Mexican Gulf. And basically, it was a very small group, only 4 people who had time and skills and who were thinking about what was what were the main problems of their city. And they landed on a specific problem that's very important in terms of SDG 11, which is transportation, right? So transportation, public transportation, is one of the greatest assets a city can have. Basically, when both locals or visitors understand how to move around the city, that also moves economy, that also gives us a right to occupy the public space and to be able to live like good lives, be able to move around, go to school, go to work. And one of the things that happened in Jalapa, and one of the things that happens in Mexico, is that the legislation, we're a federal republic. So by law, the states are responsible for public transportation, but public transportation works at the municipal level, at the city level. So whenever cities want to think about public transportation, they usually do not have the data. They do not know how many routes they have, where do those routes go, how do they work, who is the company that's in charge of those routes. And this happened in Jalapa. So in order for you to be able to kind of find a bus that would take you anywhere, it was very hard. You wouldn't know where the bus stops were, you wouldn't know where the routes went, etc. Even for locals, it was very hard, who normally use their public transportation system. They knew their usual routes, but if they had to go anywhere else, it was a hard problem. So the team, the brigade, came up with a specific problem, which was, okay, we need the actual data of the routes. We need to know how the public transportation is right now in order to think about changing it and building a more sustainable and more equitable public transportation system. So based on another app, which is Transit One, another open source software, we built MapMap, which is an open source app that works on Android that any citizen can use. They get on the route, they turn on the app, and they basically can move around the city within that route and map the route. And whenever they're done, they go off the bus and they go somewhere with Wi-Fi and they upload the route to a server, right? So it's not, as Sean said, because I love everything he talked about, it's not just about building it, it's about collaboration and who you build it with. So this particular project was not only built by these 4 people, it was accompanied by experts in the field. We were working with WRI. It was also built with citizens themselves and with the municipality. So during an entire weekend, these 4 people convinced 400 citizens to basically get on the routes and map them, and came up with a map of the city in basically 1 weekend, right? This map was actually, so what you actually get in the end is a GTFS, which is a standard for public transportation data, that's open and that we gave the municipality so they could plan ahead. But after this particular thing, and this is also a thing about scale, as Sean was saying, we also worked on packaging this methodology, this app, and also like giving common infrastructure to anyone who wanted to do this exercise. So we built mapatonciudadano.org. This app has been used in Mexico. We used it in Jalapa and Veracruz, but it has also been used in the Dominican Republic, in Ecuador, in Colombia, who have very similar problems. We have the website where you can find the methodology, like anything you need to build your own Mapaton, even without us. And we're actually currently also doing it in a couple more cities in Mexico, which are Zitácuaro in Michoacán and La Paz in Baja California Sur. So basically what we ambition is being able to have the data for public transportation in most cities in Mexico and in the region, if anyone else or any other country has this particular specific problem, but also working with grassroots organizations. So we're also working with activists that have been working for a while in Mexico to have better streets for pedestrians and for anyone who wants to take a bike, etc., and to be able to create better public transportation systems. So what we did in order to scale is actually make an alliance with Humanitarian OpenStreetMap and Trufi, which is another association that works in buses, and also with La Liga Peatonal here in Mexico and other organizations that work on the grassroots level to be able to also build recommendations in how to better build public transportation systems. That's where this project is right now. Yeah, and I would love to hear your questions. And since I don't have to go anywhere anytime soon, we can still talk about scale, collaboration, etc. in the other rounds.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alma. Yeah, I really appreciate the different angles that make a city safe and inclusive that the panelists have taken so far. So informal settlement, but also transportation. Like they're very linked, right? Like people from different socioeconomic backgrounds are more affected by a poor transportation system. Pedestrians having good sidewalks, good biking lanes improves the quality of life. So very interesting to see the different approaches that organizations take to achieving that SDG 11 from different sectors. I think up next we have Gurdon Batra. He's joining us from Dark Matter Labs from sunny California. Over to you.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
You always have to ask this. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Gurdane. Very happy to be here and super nice to hear from others also, and looking forward to more talks coming up. I'm going to start the timer because it's going to be hard for me to keep myself in 5 minutes. As Sean said, we can discuss this for hours and hours. So yeah, I'm coming in from Dark Matter Labs. I've been working there for now, I think it's been 2 or 3 years now. So yeah, I'm just going to first give some introduction of what is this Dark Matter Labs. I don't know if people are familiar or not, probably not. And a little bit of, as Alma also said, so much of how we work, it's so much to distinguish the work process of civic tech from, let's say, big tech or traditional tech. Then I would like to give some example projects, and I would love to also talk about challenges in the tech field also, because I feel we also have to address those. And if we get time, something about this portfolio approach. So yeah, what is this Dark Matter Labs, right? I mean, I always start this conversation with like building context of the climate crisis, but I think the place we are in, I don't need to do that. I think everyone gets where we are at. Also, please, I think at Dark Matter Labs, we do sometimes we create our own terminology and we use fancy words, I will say. So please stop me if some jargon or term comes up, or put it in the chat. I would love to explain and break it down. But yeah, this is the statement we are going with these days, which says we're optimistically exploring 21st century alternatives, working to prove the viability of an ecologically just and planetary civic economy. Yeah, what does that even mean, right? I think to give you the story behind this, like Dark Matter Lab started as a bunch of architects who was sick of doing traditional work, and they were in the wake of the climate crisis, wanted to do something about change the city's work, not just build the built environment. And it started off more of a think tank producing reports. And then in the last 2-3 years, when I joined, we're trying to become more tangible, putting out real prototypes, putting out more like, interacting with it, like not just a report, but something more real. So we are still in the process. I wouldn't say we have reached a point that we have deployed civic tech, which is already in use, but yeah, we're getting there. And how do we do this? I mean, we use this word a lot, civic infrastructures, so it's in the body it also says join the boring revolution. So it's all about attaching yourself to this. And again, as in terms of what we're talking about today, right? SDG 11. So we focus a lot about cities and of course, to make them all safe, resilient, inclusive, all those words, and even more indicators, right? And how we do this is like, we call something like a portfolio approach. It's like, we're not just focusing on one thing, but we're focusing on this whole variety of different things, from retrofits to the urban forest, to housing, to cities, and also making sure this four things mentioned here, how do they talk to each other? How do we share data, assets, and these kind of things? And of course, the goal being to replicate the portfolio in different cities. And of course, I know all cities are different with different challenges. Some things might be easier in Europe, but might not be easier in places like in India, where I'm from. So it's also, of course, understanding the context more, but still trying to like talk with partners and make things connect together. Yeah, again, this is the same point which I was trying to make. This is kind of the philosophy of Dark Matter Labs, of kind of looking at cities, but then breaking it down into neighborhoods and different value chains, but also being able to connect it to like national and transnational and global, because we all know, right, to solve this climate, or to do something towards climate crisis, we all need to work together. It's not like one city and they achieve their goals and it's all over, right? It's all this network. And we call these while we're building the civic tech, what we're actually building is these, as we call them, instruments, right? Institutional instruments. Again, the word became a, we could call it something else. Things like a financial instrument, things like smart outcome planning, how to plan with data. And we also kind of, when we create a project, we make sure which instruments are used in which project, and kind of, so you're getting a recipe also, because some city might need a different combination of these instruments, something, because they might already have something, or they are prioritizing a different problem to solve. So, it's again, and I think I'm not, don't have to repeat that is a multi-actor thing. Like, a lot of people have to work together and to form this partnership and form this. It's very different from, our traditional tech industry, where people are forming these monopolies and they're like, we'll do everything, so it's very important to say this again and again, that is, we have to work, like all of us in the room also right now, how do we work together? Looking at the time, it's almost 5 minutes. So before time is over, I also would like to give 2 example projects. Again, I could talk about this for more than 2 hours, so I'm like really rushing myself. So one project I work a lot is called Trees as Infrastructure. Primarily, we are in Glasgow right now, but yeah, the goal to expand even further. And basically, we found out that cities don't have enough money to maintain the urban forests. And when I say that, I don't just mean, you plant 1,000 trees and it's all over, right? We did the research, and so 50% of those beautiful tree planting projects which go on Instagram, they die and they don't get you all the goals. And we all are available. I'm sure we all are familiar with the carbon market and how easy it is to fudge the numbers and do greenwashing. So this project is to bring this kind of inclusivity. Like, we understand what values do trees actually bring us, and then can we connect those values to some monetary value, and can we make sure they are giving the what is being promised. And and there's a study which also says more urban, the areas which are more urbanly viable are more safer, also there's less crime. So again, all those indicators are there somewhere. If you want, I can even open them up. So yeah, I can talk a lot more about this project, but I'll give one more example, which is another project called Circular, which we are doing in the city of Amsterdam. And this is, we're making a digital tool for the lawmakers themselves, because it turns out, so the country has made a commitment to become more circular, but they don't have the resources to, like, what does it even mean circular, right? So we're kind of demystifying their own legal setup through some very basic data analysis, no fancy AI, but like people actually going through law one by one, creating a spreadsheet, like very prototypey approach. And now we're creating a CMS system to make it easier. I have more projects, which I will not go through them right now, but if you want to talk to me later, I'll send the link. I just want to end with this slide. So also open up some of the challenges we all have to be aware of while we're working with civic tech, because this is one of my favorite topics. I mean, I wrote my master's thesis about it. First is the materials and mining, right? Like, all these phones we carry around in our pockets, they come, and computers, there's still mining needed to be done to create those. And a lot of these materials, they cannot be recycled, so we just have to be acknowledging what is this number of impact which we have to work with, right? And we all are also aware of data centers. And I was reading the article yesterday how there's some droughts happening now because of the Microsoft data center. Again, there are techniques to do it better. There are techniques to use renewable. There are techniques to make cooling centers better. But we have to first start acknowledging what is the number behind this, of the data center emission. And it's increasing, right? So that's why we always have to check. The extractive methodology, what I mean by that is, we all use all these design, like user testing or like growth and all this kind of, like the methodologies we are using, they have been created for extraction. They have been created by a lot of these companies, which, like human-centered design, for example. So we have to be careful when we do civic tech of how we need to change them to be more open and not recreate the problem, if you know what I mean. And there is a big dependence on big tech. We are using Zoom right now. We use Google Server, Google Cloud. I don't know what that means. Maybe it's okay, but I think we still need to check on that, while we create more open tech, while having a dependence on the big tech. And the last one, I think, is would have to open this up in the conversation later. Like, this working with city councils is often very hard because they don't have the tech capability. I can make a tool, but it's a living organism, a civic tech for me, right? They need to take it over and give it life and maintain it and do ownership. But sometimes it's very hard. And Dark Matter Labs is also, we are not a consultancy. We are not a dev agency. So I don't know. We're still figuring it out. What is our role working with councils? I have some more slides about what is this portfolio approach, but maybe I'll leave it for later. But yeah, thanks for listening.
No, I mean, Gordon, thank you for
Sorry if I
the
rushed it.
No. And I definitely, I'm a big fan of Dark Matter Labs actually, and the 3S Infrastructures project actually. My mother-in-law is a counselor, a city counselor, well,
really?
a small town counselor in rural Canada, and she's very an advocate for tree preservation. And when I shared what Dark Matter Labs had wrote, I mean, she loved it, and I gave major son-in-law points. So thank you indirectly for that.
Very happy to hear that.
Thank you once again for your presentation. Up next, we have Cinia del Villar from Data Pop Alliance, and she has to tell us where in the world she's located.
Yeah, sure. I will share my screen. I am located now in Mexico. In general, I'm located in France, but now for this year, I'm in Mexico, in Yucatan. So yes, and you will know why I'm located here, because, well, we are an international non-profit. So we work in different countries. So I will give you an introduction of what is DPA and what are our topics of work. And in these topics of work, how we work directly with the SDGs, especially with the SDGs 11. So we are a think tank of research expert practitioners, policymakers, and activists created in 2013 by the MIT, Harvard, and ODI. First of all, in USA, but since 2 years ago in Mexico, we are a non-profit in Mexico too. 1 year ago in Senegal, and some months ago in France too. So we have an international team. We work through these thematic programs: digital transformation, AI for statistics for the SDGs, AI and statistics for the SDGs, resilient livelihoods and ecosystem. This is about how the population can improve when you have, for example, COVID crisis or migration crisis, climate change crisis, etc. Data feminism, geographies of inequalities, that this is very related with the SDG 11, and technology and democracy. So I will give you an overview of where we work. For example, these were our focus of work is Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and MENA region. This is the map and our work in 2021. This is the map of our projects in 2022. So we are really focusing in these regions. In particular, here, for example, we are working with the European Union, but this is only for the program of digital transformation. This is more a kind of evaluation diagnostic of how with the international organization, how they are funding the different projects around the world. So the program 2, that this is exactly about SDGs, how we use AI and statistics for the SDGs. We have the project, this idea of this program is to equip individuals and organizations with data skills, system and standards to navigate the age of data and develop measure methodologies for policy and the SDGs, right? So of course we use in general a mixed method evidence. So in the one side quantitative and in the other qualitative data to arrive to our goals of the project. So now I will only give you a kind of resume of what we are working on for the SDGs in general. So for example, we are working with ISID in Latin America in 5 countries, that is Peru, Bolivia, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Republica Dominican, to give them skills to work with big data and SDGs. In general, another one in general is that we developed the first VNR, is the Voluntary National Review about how Liberia is going with all their SDGs. Now we are working with Morocco. This is very interesting, but because we are doing a benchmark or how they are in general in the SDGs, and we are working We will do 3 pilots about different SDGs. Maybe one of these pilots is specific in SDG 11, but this is a very high-level structure, a diagnostic monitor of how the countries are working on their SDGs in particular. Another one, for example, in the program of Data Feminists, here we produce evidence for advocacy and policy to accelerate intersectional feminist and LGBTQ plus data, inclusive gender equality. So here, for example, yesterday was published an article with Where is My Transport organization about mobility and gender in Mexico City and Lima. That this is how we can do an inclusion of women, because in general, women are the vulnerable, one of the populations that are more vulnerable in the transport, in particular in big cities like Mexico City and Lima. So you can go to this article. It was published yesterday, and this is a very good article about different perception of the transport in Mexico and Lima. And the other program that is more related with this SDG 11 is this one of geographies of inequalities. We study directly and we contribute to greater understand the implication of dynamics of poverty, violence, and migration, considering vulnerable populations and subgroups, identities, and experience inside the cities. So this program is really related about what we are working. And here we create a report that is very interesting, and you can read it with Oxfam. The name is Mundos Paralelos. Here we work with mobility data of how the 2 outliers of the population, the richest and the poorest inside Mexico City, use the city and move inside the city. This to understand the inclusion, the points of encounters of these 2 kind of populations, how they move inside the city. For example, if they take a private car or if they move with the transport, and how they are, how they interact together inside the city, and how the city is constructed for these 2 outliers of the population. This to have an idea of how we need to develop or urbanize our cities to be more inclusive and more democratic in a democratic way. So that's the work that we are doing inside DPA about SDG 11. Thank you.
Thank you, Cinia, and I really appreciate the intersectional lens that you bring to a lot of your work. Like I'm familiar with some of the work you guys do, and if and you mentioned this at the end, if we're talking about inclusivity in cities, we invariably have to take an intersectional lens where we consider different identities by gender identities and socioeconomic statuses and a myriad of other different interlapping identities that people face in the city. So very appreciative of that, and thank you for sharing and a note for others to really bring that intersectional lens to all of their work. Up next, and last but not least, we have Martin van Gratz joining us all the way from Germany. So again, it's hard for me to pronounce the name in German, hence why the Spanish accent comes out. So over to you, Martin.
That's fine. The name works in all languages and accents. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. So my presentation is different in that I'm not presenting a civic tech project per se, but I'm presenting a small part of my ongoing PhD research, which on a topic that I call digital city making. So I basically look at civic tech initiatives such as the local chapters of Code for All, or the projects that we heard of from the other speakers today, from a perspective of urban planning. So why is it relevant for urbanism? Data are not neutral, nor are they ever independent from their spatial context. So they can have a direct, tangible effect on the physical world. Maybe some of you know this project by an artist named Simon Weckert, who hacked Google Maps by carrying a cart with 99 smartphones along a street in Berlin which caused Google Maps to identify it as a traffic jam. And then this in turn meant that actual cars were diverted to other streets. And so we cannot ignore that data can have an effect on our daily decisions, but also on policy decisions that have profound consequences for urban development. And I think it's important to point out that cities are planned and built not only by sovereign actors or companies, but also by civil society. So this is what in German we call it Stadtmacher, and I translated this to city makers who have always been working to co-produce and shape urban space. You could also call them grassroots initiatives or DIY urbanism or tactical urbanism. And now the rise of digital technology in urban environments and processes confronts these initiatives with a new context and also new challenges. But at the same time, it gives them new tools. So we have seen local communities collecting data and applying digital tools to solve problems that they perceive in their cities. And this in turn further alters the context for cooperative urban development. Now, there are new players that also join their cause from a different perspective. These are technology experts or civic hackers or simply people who like to play around with new technology. And they are using their skills also to make a difference on the local scale. So what I want to show is that this digital city making process can actively impact urban development in different ways. And I don't mean to bore you with too much theory, and also I don't have time to go into details, but I did find some striking similarities in urban studies and science and technology studies. So first, the role of civil society is changing from passive consumption towards active co-creation. So in one case, we're talking about urban space. In the other, we're talking about technology and data, but the trend seems to be the same. And this means we also need to consider a new kind of governance for urban development and in data. So processes are becoming more open, and city making is seen as little building blocks that complement the large-scale planning of municipalities. And in technology, this has really been a part of the hacker culture for a long time, that is based on openness and allowing people to adapt technology to their own needs. And I noticed when it comes down to it, what is the ultimate goal and why is it important for cities? And this is where it also ties in with the SDGs, I believe, is that it's about justice. So we have spatial justice on the one hand, such as access to spaces or this right to the city movement. And we have data justice, meaning who gets what as a result of data systems. So all in all, there seems to be a lot of hope pinned on these civic tech initiatives, that they will develop alternatives to the dominating smart city paradigm, where large corporations turn their attention to urban space and or community assets such as space and data in order to make a profit. But there has not been a lot of empirical research on these initiatives and how exactly they work towards making the city more sustainable and more just. So from my observations so far, I found that digital city makers really translate between space and ideas that people have about the space through data. So they access, generate, and manage data, but most importantly, they make the data accessible to others as well. And one way they do it is through maps, as we've seen a few today. And in this example, this visualization by Karim Douib shows the street names of Brussels colored by gender, showing that only 6% of the streets are named after women. And this information was compiled from existing data on OpenStreetMaps and Wikipedia by more than 70 volunteers of Open Knowledge Belgium. And these initiatives make their solutions available locally, but also online, so they can easily be replicated in other places. So for instance, the resources for equal street names are all documented on GitHub. And the project has so far been copied in 43 cities in 17 countries. So what I did over the past couple of years is I collected examples of such initiatives from around the world. and now have a list of about 300 cases, many of them from the Code for All network, but also from other databases such as the Civic Tech Field Guide and from a Twitter network analysis that I did. And I tried to visualize them on a map, and you can see many examples in North America. We've seen some from Mexico today, and in Europe, and also in East Asia, in Japan and Taiwan especially. And I do want to point out that, of course, like we've seen today, there are many great examples of civic tech initiatives in the Global South. The networks here in the United States, Germany, and Japan just stand out because of their large number of local brigades. So I've added those all individually because I'm really interested in the local level. So yeah, that's where I will focus my research. The map is also not meant to be exhaustive, but if you do have an important initiative that you think I missed, I'm grateful for suggestions. And yeah, the reason I collected this is to have a basis for identifying cases that I want to send my online survey to. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. So yeah, I'm really here to also learn from all of you. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mark, for the presentation, and thank you for the shout out to smart cities. So I shared in the chat, but we do a lot of work here in Canada, my organization, on offering an alternative model to the business narrative that's been pushed on a smart city. So one that actually focuses on processes and who's being included in power decision making and the different relations that you find in a city space. So definitely invite you to check that out, and we can connect after. And then thank you to all the panelists for their presentations. We have a couple of minutes, well, 10 minutes for questions that we've been receiving through the chat and through YouTube and other media. So I'll pose those questions and then invite the panelists to answer. And if nobody does, then I'm just gonna start calling out names for people to answer the question. So the first one is on related to agency and local communities. So how, in your experience, your organizations and your different projects, how they provide agency to local communities and the individuals, and how can, or how have you involved them in the local decision making processes, and have you found that through this involvement, have they been able to develop more knowledge about government and decision-making processes? Who wants to start?
I can start with an example from a baton. So whenever we make an implementation in a different city, we actually look for people within that city to not only map the routes, but also kind of be able to know how to process them. We give them a capacity building workshop that allows them to use OpenStreetMap and different technologies. So they not only like map the routes, but are participating in the process of actually building the map and talking with the municipality officers as to what's going to happen next, right? So one thing that's very important to us is kind of also empower them and be able, and for them to be able to carry on the conversation with local officers as to what's going to happen with their public transportation. And we look for local grassroots groups that want to participate in the project. And well, the project itself is open, so anyone can take it and do it on their own within their city.
Cool. Anyone else that would like to share experience?
I can add just a little bit. I mean, I will say, this has been incredibly challenging for us at Dark Matter Labs because we are pretty kind of remote, right? We have some office in London, small office, and we were remote even before COVID started. So, this was already set up to be this kind of thing. And we have struggled, I'll be honest, so in some project, it's very easy to make things which work in theory. But when you go, like I remember we were doing a project in Zagreb about retrofitting, and we had this like very nice presentation and everything. And then we gave it a presentation and we found out about so much actual corruption and like lack of certification and all those points which we're relying on, they don't really work practically. So I feel like you really have to touch base. If you can afford to fly and get there yourself, amazing. But then you need to talk to someone. And I think there is no way around it, because if you check your own biases as you come in and you have to like get the local perspective. So we always find partners. I think that's the answer. And one last thing I'll say, you have to also go beyond the the digital mediums and actually like try to like make conversations with people in a physical space and make give free coffee and donuts and talk like I think you need to like break the barriers as much as possible and try to condense your content to be more easily understandable and not yeah.
Yeah, 100% agree. I've worked on some civic tech projects in Ukrainian. I don't speak Ukrainian, and I can't imagine doing that in a digital way, as opposed to just being able to stumble through your words and smile and laugh when all this like nonverbal communication happens. I think if there aren't any from Martin or Sinia, if you don't have anything else to share, we can move on to the next question. But I'll open it a little bit. Okay, Sinia, here.
Yes, only one comment, and I think that this is related with Alma's comment and Gordon's too. Is this part of decolonization of data and in general of methodologies that we need exactly, and this is something that we need. For one side is decolonization, to know exactly what are the needs before we arrive with a solution. And in a second part, this part of mixed methods, not only focus on this part of quantitative data methodologies, but we need qualitative information to have a best impact of our project and to improve really the situation inside the cities and in general in all the type of projects for all the SDGs. So I think only to highlight this part that it's very, very important. And this can be the success or not for a project.
Definitely, and cross-disciplinary too, like we mentioned, and you guys mentioned working with activists, lawyers, urbanists. Like I think no one person has all the skills, so I think definitely.
Yes, totally,
methods.
totally, yes.
Martin, or should we move to the next question?
No, it's really great for me to hear from actual projects, people who have experience in this field. I just think it's a great question that I'm also asking myself. Is this or it's one of those hopes that I mentioned, that these more grassroots initiatives are able to provide people with a sense of agency on a local scales, more than the traditional sort of democratic processes that may have alienated people in a lot of places, or that governments are not perceived as accountable to. So to give local communities or to show them what options they actually have, or what agency they have. I think and I see some great examples here. So thank you.
Well, thank you again for sharing your research. And we have 2 minutes, so I'll try to sneak in one question, and I'll ask the panelists to keep it brief. So if you could give us, just to finish, the biggest challenge you have encountered in implementation, as well as the biggest lesson you have learned and you would like to share on implementation. So I'll go by the order that's on my screen. So I'll start with Gordon.
That's a big question. But the biggest challenge is, I'll come back to what I said in my presentation also, I think off the top of my head, because I've done, I show like that's how DM works. Right? We have different projects going on, and each project has a different kind of collaboration with the city council at first, and then with the larger city itself, right? And I've seen the tightness and the looseness of these collaborations. And of course, I think someone talked about scale also, like how to scale projects is always on the mind, right? But I think that has been, so this is a challenge and the biggest answer at the same time. That one project, we were like, hey, we have from the get-go, we have to be scaling, we have to think of the whole world, and and we came with that challenge. So which led to us, we did collaborate with councils on the project, but very loose collaboration, because we're like, they are saying something, but maybe the other council which we'll talk to in a different city will be better, and that kind of led us to be a little bit like just all over the place, but never zoomed in, so I think that's what I feel like. Again, maybe this might be obvious, but I think start small, start with one council first, make a very rough prototype, and do follow up with the prototyping process, and test early what is not working, and try to get on the ground. And I know we all are working in open source code, most of it, but it's not just about open sourcing the code, but it's about open sourcing a lot of other things around the code of how it was made, and terminology which everyone understands. So it's not just open source for the coders, but for the actual citizens. Maybe I'll keep it short.
It's good. It's good. Alma, over to you. Biggest challenge and biggest lesson.
I think, like similar to Gordon, my biggest challenge is also like the biggest learning. And for us, what we have realized is that really no civic tech project or software can thrive without a community around it. And I mean a community of users and a technical community as well, just because of the size of our organizations. So that's our biggest lesson, but that's also the biggest challenge, because as Gordon said, you need the physicality of it. You need to work on not just the problem, but on community relationships, and think about this as a way to build differently, and a way to, we need to also think differently in terms of scale than big tech, right? A lot of founders suddenly want really, really big scales, when maybe we don't need really big scales, and we need to defend local scales and small scales and grassroots. So I think that's also a very big learning for us and challenge.
Thank you, Alma. Martin, you're up next on my screen.
Yeah, so your question, that's also one of my main research questions, actually, that I'm interested in. And I think from this more general urban planning perspective, I think the main challenge or the interest lies in how these initiatives tie in with the traditional pillars of urban planning processes, and how they can how they complement each other. So there's some tasks that are still there for the municipality, but there are also some areas where civic tech initiatives can really add a lot, and what can be learned from each other, and what are really the contributions. I think that's what I'm hoping to explore, and see what are the challenges or the obstacles also in this potential beneficial process for a city. But I don't have a concrete answers. That's more a better question for the projects themselves.
No, and we really look forward to when you share your research with the Code for All network. And last but not least is Sinia.
Yes, I think that this is just difficult question, but according to our experience, for example, and this with this question of Gordon about how to scale the solutions that we have, I think that for now this is impossible. Why? Because if we do a project, for example, in one city in Latam, we will have some type of data because we have the partnerships there, because etc. etc. And then if we want to scale it or to replicate the same project to another city or another country or another region, we will not have the same type of data. So we will start sometimes from scratch because we don't have nothing similar, right? So I think that here the important issue that we need to push and that we need to create is a kind of data economy regulation, right? That is, for example, is part of all the private data that we can have access, and that this is very, very important to us to have access to for public policy, for data for good, etc. I think that this type of data need to be regulated by I don't know if international organization or maybe national laws that we can have access for this type of projects. Because I don't know, for example, I have in my experience 10 years ago have access to CDRs of mobile data. It was kind of easy way, and we have a lot of very important information there. And now it's impossible to have this type of data, right? So I think that we need to regulate all this private data, not only for CDR, but all the startups, applications, etc., that have a lot of data and that they really don't want to share it, or they have expensive costs that we will not have the budget to have this type of data. I think that this is an essential point. And of course, this part of holistic decision makers, that not only government, but activists, to have all the intersectional point of view of our projects. This is, of course, but this is something that we can do, and that we can aggregate information, that we can parallelize to, for example, we like that to have the solution of the problem, right? But the solution of the problem, it's not the first time that someone else think about it. So we need to partner with all the persons that are working in that solution to do before a benchmark of what was done before. And then with this idea to partner with them to go together with a unique solution for different institutions, different academic, different private sector, ONGs, NGOs, etc., etc., etc. So I think that these are, for me, two main ideas that we need to create together.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the call to collaboration and the call to action we're ending the panel on today. And then so I thank you to everyone who stuck the extra 5 minutes to hear the last question. So very grateful to that. And thank you so much to the panelists for sharing their ideas, for sharing their research, for sharing their projects. Before we all sign off, and just bear with me for a couple more minutes, if anyone in the audience would like to learn more about Code for All, about the SDGs, about a lot of the conversations we've had, and if you I see there's some issues with the recording, but if you want to continue connecting with the panelists, with different people in the network, please join the Code for All Slack channel. You'll get opportunities to talk to everyone, share research. There's also a Code for All bi-monthly newsletter that you're also able to join if you're more of a email kind of person and less instant messaging kind of person. And finally, feel free to share your feedback. Mar is putting all these links in the chat for you to be able to tell us how we did, see if there's any other discussions you would like to have regarding the SDGs or civic tech in general. And all these links will also be available in the YouTube live stream video. So please go there if you want to join and share more. And thank you once again to everyone. And I hope to run into you either virtually or in person at some point in the near future.